Chapter 1. A glimpse of the impossible. The wind howled through the ancient forest, shaking the trees as though the earth itself was in pain. I'd been walking through this forest for hours, the same familiar path leading me deeper into the unknown. There were whispers in the woods, rumors from the villagers that had been told to me time and time again, of strange happenings in these woods. They spoke of shadows moving in the dark, of creatures that shouldn't exist, and of a powerful hidden force that no one dared to name. But I wasn't afraid. Not yet, anyway. My name is Eleanor, and I've always been the type of person to seek the truth. It's what led me here, to the edge of the woods, where no one dared to tread. My grandmother had told me stories of this place when I was younger, tales of an ancient power hidden deep within the forest. For years I thought they were just that, stories. But when I found the old journal in the attic, filled with strange symbols and half-finished sketches of the forest, I knew there was something more to it. The journal belonged to my great-grandfather, who had disappeared when my grandmother was just a child. The entries were strange, cryptic. They spoke of a gate in the forest, a doorway to another world, and the consequences of opening it. I'd always assumed it was a myth, just another family tale, but something about the journal felt real. There was a map in the back, a crude, hand-drawn map that seemed to lead directly to the heart of the forest, to something hidden away. Tonight, under the pale moonlight, I had decided to follow the map. The deeper I walked into the woods, the more oppressive the air became. It wasn't just the cold, it was something else, an invisible weight that pressed down on me, as though the trees themselves were watching, waiting. The path grew narrow, the trees closer together, their gnarled branches twisting like skeletal hands. I stopped when I saw it. The clearing. It was small, almost hidden, surrounded by dense trees, their trunks thick with vines. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient stone archway, worn with age. But it was the archway that caught my attention. There was a faint, glowing light emanating from the cracks in the stone, pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. My breath caught in my throat. I knew, without a doubt, that this was the place from the map, the gate my great-grandfather had written about. But what was it? And why had he been so desperate to protect it? I stepped forward, my heart pounding in my chest. As I approached the archway, I noticed the ground beneath my feet was soft, almost like it was alive. The faint hum of energy in the air grew stronger the closer I got. I hesitated for a moment, uncertainty creeping into my mind. I had no idea what I was walking into, no idea what would happen if I stepped through that arch. But the curiosity, the need to understand, was overwhelming. My grandmother had never spoken of this gate, and the journal had hinted at secrets that were far beyond anything I could imagine. With one final breath, I stepped forward, crossing the threshold of the archway. The world shifted. At first it was just a slight tug, a sensation like falling, and then everything went dark. Chapter 2. The Land Beyond the Gate. When I opened my eyes, I found myself lying on soft grass, the cool night air brushing against my skin. My heart was still racing, but the fear that had gripped me moments before was replaced by an overwhelming sense of awe. The sky above me was unlike anything I'd ever seen. There were two moons, one a deep purple and the other a pale gold, casting their light across a strange, alien landscape. I slowly sat up, my hands brushing against the grass, which seemed to shimmer slightly, glowing faintly in the moonlight. Felt alive. Everything around me was different. This wasn't the forest I had walked through. The trees here were taller, their bark a smooth, dark gray, almost metallic in appearance. The air smelled sweet, with hints of something unfamiliar, like flowers I had never smelled before. I stood cautiously, my mind still spinning. Had I really crossed into another world? Was this some kind of dream? The idea seemed impossible, but the evidence was all around me. The sky was the most obvious sign. The two moons, the stars arranged in unfamiliar constellations. But it wasn't just the sky. There was a strange, subtle energy in the air, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It was like the land itself was alive, watching me, waiting for me. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage, and began walking forward. The clearing I had arrived in was bordered by a dense forest, the trees appearing even more imposing up close. Their twisted branches stretched high above me, forming a canopy that blocked out the twin moons. The forest felt ancient, older than anything I had ever encountered. As I moved deeper into the forest, I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching me. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, I saw nothing but shadows, yet the hairs on my neck prickled and my heart quickened. The sense of being observed was palpable, and though I tried to push it aside, I couldn't. Something was out there, hidden among the trees, and it was following me. After what felt like hours of walking through the forest, I came upon a large, circular clearing. In the center stood a stone pedestal, ancient and weathered by time. On top of the pedestal lay an object, glowing faintly, its surface covered in intricate symbols that seemed to shift and change as I looked at them. My breath caught in my throat. This was what I had been searching for. The journal had mentioned an artifact, something powerful, something that could either save or destroy this world. My great-grandfather had warned of its power, but I had never imagined it would be so real. I approached the pedestal slowly, my heart pounding. The energy radiating from the object seemed to grow stronger with each step I took. The symbols on its surface flickered and shifted as though they were alive, calling to me, drawing me closer. I reached out a hand, trembling, and as soon as my fingers brushed against the surface, a shock of energy coursed through my body. I gasped, stumbling backward, but the energy did not dissipate. It flooded my senses, filling me with a strange warmth. I closed my eyes for a moment, and when I opened them again, everything was different. The world around me seemed sharper, clearer. I could feel the energy of the land, the pulse of life in the trees, the earth beneath my feet. I could hear the whisper of voices on the wind, words in a language I didn't understand but somehow knew. "Who are you?" a voice said suddenly, and I froze. It was coming from behind me. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat, but saw no one. "Who are you?" the voice repeated, this time louder, and the ground beneath me seemed to vibrate with its power. Before I could react, a figure emerged from the shadows at the edge of the clearing. It was tall, cloaked in dark robes that shimmered with a strange, ethereal light. Its face was hidden beneath a hood, but the presence of the figure sent a wave of fear crashing over me. This was no ordinary person. It felt like I was in the presence of something ancient. "I am not your enemy," the figure said, its voice resonating with a power that seemed to ripple through the air itself. "But you should not be here." I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat. My mind raced, trying to understand what was happening. Who was this figure? Why had they appeared now, just as I had discovered the artifact? "You have unlocked something that was meant to remain hidden," the figure continued, stepping forward. "And now you must face the consequences." "What have I done?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I don't understand. What is this place? What is that artifact?" The figure tilted its head, as if considering my question. "You are in the land of the forgotten, a world that was once part of your own. That artifact is the key to its power, and you have activated it." I took a step back, my thoughts spinning. Key? To what? And why was this world so familiar? Something about it tugged at me, as if it were calling to me from deep within. The figure seemed to sense my confusion. "That artifact has the power to reshape worlds, to alter the fabric of reality. But it is dangerous, and those who seek it rarely leave with their lives." I swallowed hard, fear gnawing at me. "How do I return home?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure's eyes, glowing faintly from beneath its hood, seemed to pierce through me. "The gate you passed through is no longer a doorway. It is a barrier, and it is closing. You may not leave unless you undo what you have done." A cold chill washed over me, and I realized with a sudden clarity what I had to do. Had to fix this. But how? Chapter 3. The Path of Shadows. The figure remained silent for a long moment, its glowing eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. I could feel the weight of its gaze, like it was peering directly into my soul, seeing through all the layers of doubt and confusion that clouded my mind. The air around us seemed to thicken, pressing in on me, and for a brief second, I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake by stepping through that gate. I swallowed hard, trying to regain control of my emotions. Fear had been my constant companion in this strange world, but I couldn't afford to let it take over now. My mind raced, grasping at fragments of the journal I had found. My great-grandfather's cryptic words about undoing the curse and restoring the balance. But none of it made sense. What curse? What balance? How do I undo what I've done? I asked, my voice trembling but determined. What does that even mean? You say I activated something. But I don't understand what I've released. The figures had shifted, and for the first time, I thought I saw a hint of emotion in its presence. Sadness, perhaps, or pity. You have unleashed a force that has been locked away for eons, the figure replied, its voice resonating with an ancient power. This world, the Forgotten Land, was once connected to your own. Long ago, it was sealed away to protect both realms. But you have torn down the barrier between them, and now the worlds are bleeding into one another. I stepped back, my mind reeling. I didn't mean to. I didn't know what I was doing. The figure took a step closer, and though its face remained hidden beneath the hood, I could feel its presence looming over me like a shadow. That is the tragedy. Those who seek power often do not understand the cost. The artifact you touched, its power has awakened something dark, something ancient. It is the heart of this land, and it has been waiting for someone like you. The words struck me like a thunderclap, reverberating in the depths of my mind. Someone like me. I repeated. What do you mean? The artifact calls to those who are destined to change the course of history, the figure said, its voice softening slightly. But you are not ready for the consequences. No one is. I felt the weight of those words settle in my chest, a heavy burden that made it hard to breathe. So what now? How do I fix this? How do I return to my world? The figure paused, and the silence that followed was suffocating. There is no easy path back, it finally said. The gate will close, yes, but not in the way you expect. To return to your world, you must restore the balance. The artifact must be returned to its rightful place, inside the heart of this land. Only then will the veil between the worlds be sealed again, and you will have the chance to go home. A sense of dread washed over me, even though I had expected this. Restoring balance. Returning the artifact. Sounded so simple, but I could feel that it was anything but. My great-grandfather's journal had mentioned a hidden temple, a place where the artifact was once protected. But that was all. There were no instructions, no clear path. How could I possibly know where to begin? But how? I whispered, the words escaping before I could stop them. Where is this temple? How do I find it? The figure's glowing eyes softened, and it stepped back, as if allowing me to process the weight of its words. You must travel deeper into the forest, past the ruins of the old kingdom. There you will find the entrance to the temple. But be warned, the path is treacherous. There are those who seek the artifact for their own purposes. They will stop at nothing to prevent you from restoring balance. I felt a chill run down my spine. Those who sought the artifact. Who were they? And why would anyone want to keep the worlds bleeding together? What happens if I fail? I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. If you fail, the figure said gravely, the worlds will collapse into chaos. The fabric of both realities will tear apart. And you will be trapped here forever. I felt my breath catch in my throat. The weight of the figure's words crushed me, but deep down, I knew there was no turning back. If I didn't fix this, if I didn't restore the balance, I would be responsible for the destruction of both worlds. The fear that had once been a background hum in my mind now roared to the forefront of my thoughts. I won't fail, I said, the words leaving my lips with more conviction than I felt. The figure nodded, as if it had expected nothing less. Then go. Time is not on your side. The longer you wait, the stronger the pull between the worlds becomes. Find the temple, return the artifact, and seal the gate. With that, The figure turned and began to fade into the shadows, its form dissolving like mist. I stood there for a moment, paralyzed, unable to comprehend the magnitude of what I had just learned. And then, without another word, the clearing was empty. I was alone once again. The path before me seemed endless, dark and foreboding, but I had no choice. Had to follow it. There was no turning back now. The weight of the artifact in my mind, its pull, was like a constant reminder of the task ahead of me. I had to find the temple. I had to restore the balance before it was too late. I turned and began walking, my feet carrying me forward as if guided by some invisible force. The trees closed in around me, their dark branches like reaching fingers, but I didn't stop. Couldn't. Not now. I didn't know what dangers lay ahead or what I would face on this journey, but I did know one thing. The fate of both worlds rested on my shoulders, and I was not about to let it slip away. Chapter 4. Into the heart of the forgotten land. The deeper I ventured into the heart of this forgotten world, the more oppressive the air became. The forest around me grew denser, the trees taller and their shadows longer, as though the land itself was trying to swallow me whole. The strange energy that hummed in the atmosphere made my every step feel heavier, like I was walking through a dream where nothing was quite real. But it was real. The power of the artifact, its pulse inside me, was real. And the task ahead was more real than anything I had ever faced before. I had no clear sense of direction, only the vague instructions given by the figure. A place called the Old Kingdom, somewhere deep within this labyrinthine forest. The figure had warned me that the journey would be perilous, but I had no idea what I was about to encounter. The silence in the forest was unnatural. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. Only the rustling of the wind through the leaves provided any sound, but even that seemed muffled, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Every now and then I thought I glimpsed movement out of the corner of my eye. Something shifting just beyond my sight, too quick to catch. But when I turned to look, nothing was there. My legs ached with the constant walking, my body weary from the long journey, but there was no time to rest. The thought of what was at stake kept me going. I couldn't allow myself to falter. I wouldn't allow this world to fall apart because of my ignorance. As I pressed on, the forest began to change. The trees grew thinner, their trunks now covered in strange, glowing symbols, similar to the ones on the artifact. The leaves of the trees glowed in varying shades of purple and blue, casting eerie, iridescent light over the path. The air was thick with the scent of something unfamiliar, like incense mixed with the sharp, acrid smell of metal. Then, as if the forest had finally decided to reveal its secrets, I saw it. The ruins. They were ancient, crumbling structures half buried beneath thick vines and roots. Stone pillars, once tall and grand, now lay shattered and fallen in heaps of rubble. What remained of the architecture seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, like the remnants of a forgotten civilization. The air here felt charged, more intense, as though this place was a nexus of power. I stepped cautiously into the ruins, my heart racing. I could feel something alive in the stones, a presence that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The walls, though worn and covered in moss, still bore intricate carvings, scenes of great battles, celestial beings, and strange creatures. I knew I was getting closer to my goal, but the weight of the place, its ancient sorrow, began to seep into my bones. The farther I ventured into the ruins, the more overwhelming the energy became. And then, as I rounded a corner of what appeared to be a broken temple, I saw it. A massive stone door, intricately carved, stood at the end of the path. It was covered in runes that matched the symbols on the artifact. The door was cracked open, just slightly, as though it had been waiting for me to arrive. I approached the door, my breath shallow. The artifact pulsed in my chest, reacting to the presence of the doorway. I could feel the energy vibrating from the stone, calling to me, urging me forward. But something about this place felt wrong. It wasn't just the weight of the power, it was the sense of something watching me, something lurking in the shadows. The whispers I had heard in the wind earlier were louder now, clearer, though I couldn't make out their words. It was as though the land itself was speaking to me, warning me of something. But I had come too far to turn back now. With a deep breath, I placed my hand on the door, and to my surprise, it creaked open with a groan, revealing the dark interior of the temple beyond. The air inside was thick and stagnant, carrying the scent of age and decay. But there was something else too, a faint pulse of power like a heartbeat. I stepped inside cautiously, my senses alert. The temple was vast, its high ceilings supported by stone pillars that stretched into the shadows above. The walls were lined with carvings and murals, depicting the history of this forgotten land. And at the far end of the temple, on a raised platform, stood an altar. The altar was ancient, carved from dark stone, and upon it lay a pedestal. The pedestal was empty. I felt a jolt of panic. The artifact, the pedestal was waiting for it. But why was it empty? Had someone else been here before me? Or had the artifact been taken? My heart raced. This was the moment I had feared. Had I come all this way for nothing? I didn't have time to dwell on the thought. I moved forward, my feet echoing in the silence of the temple, the artifact in my chest pulsing stronger with every step. As I reached the altar, the air shifted. A figure stepped from the shadows, appearing so suddenly that I didn't have time to react. It was a man, tall and cloaked in dark robes, his face obscured by a mask of silver. His presence exuded power, an aura of dark energy that sent a chill down my spine. He stepped forward, his movements graceful and sure. "So you've come," he said, his voice low and cold, carrying a weight of authority. I froze, my eyes narrowing. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. "I am the keeper of the artifact," the man said, his masked face unreadable. "And I cannot allow you to restore the balance." "What do you mean?" I asked, my pulse quickening. "This artifact is the key to stopping the destruction of both worlds. You must understand that." "I understand far more than you think," he said, his voice now tinged with amusement. "You believe the artifact belongs to you, that you are destined to restore the balance. But you are wrong." I took a step back, confusion swirling in my mind. What was he talking about? Wasn't I the one meant to restore the balance? The man raised his hand, and the air around me seemed to crackle with energy. "You are not the savior you believe yourself to be," he said. "You are the one who tore the fabric of these worlds apart." Chapter 5. The Dark Truth Unveiled. The man's words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. My breath caught in my chest as I struggled to process what he had just said. I was the one who tore the fabric of the worlds apart. Didn't make sense. How could that be possible? I had simply been following the path, believing that the artifact was the key to fixing everything, to bringing the worlds back into balance. I took another step back, my heart pounding. "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "I'm not the cause of this. I didn't know what I was doing." The man raised his hand again, and the air shimmered with an eerie pulse of energy. It was as if his very presence was warping the reality around us. "You didn't know," he repeated, his voice cold, "because you were never meant to know. The artifact was not meant to be found by you. It was never meant to be touched." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. "But the figure," I began, but he cut me off with a sharp gesture. "The figure you met," he said, his voice dripping with disdain, "is nothing but a ghost of the past, a manifestation of the energy that once protected this land, but now serves only to deceive. The balance you seek to restore was never in danger. The real threat is not the artifact's power, it is the power within you." I felt a chill run down my spine. The man's words were like daggers, each one striking deeper than the last. "Power within me," I repeated, trying to steady my voice. "What power? I'm just trying to fix the mistake I made." "You are more than you think," he said, his voice now oddly familiar. "The moment you touched the artifact, you became bound to this land. Its power fused with yours, and in doing so, you unlocked something that was never meant to be awakened." My head was spinning. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What happened to me when I touched the artifact? He tilted his head slightly, as if considering my question. You were chosen, he said, his tone darkening. Not by fate, not by chance, but by something far older. You see, the artifact was never just a key. It was a test to see who was worthy of wielding the power that lies at the heart of this world. And you were found wanting. I felt a sharp pang of confusion, mixed with dread. I don't understand, I whispered, stepping back further, feeling the cold stone of the altar press into my back. I thought the artifact was meant to save both worlds, not destroy them. The man let out a slow, almost pitying laugh. Oh, it is meant to save the worlds if you know how to use it. But you do not. You never will. You are not the one destined to wield its power. You are a pawn in a much larger game, one that you cannot possibly hope to win. I shook my head, refusing to accept what he was saying. You're lying. You have to be. I've seen the damage. I've seen the tears in reality. The artifact is the only way to fix it. I can still set things right. The man's eyes, hidden behind the silver mask, glowed faintly as he stepped closer, his presence like an oppressive weight. You still don't understand, he said, his voice a mere whisper. The worlds are already collapsing, yes. But not because of the artifact, not because of you. It is because of something far darker, something far older than you could ever imagine. I was trembling now, my breath quickening, my thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and fear. Then why are you stopping me? Why don't you want me to restore the balance? His eyes glittered from beneath the mask, and for a brief moment I saw something, a flicker of recognition, a trace of something familiar. Because you were never meant to be the one to restore it, he said softly. You were meant to be the one to destroy it. I felt the ground beneath my feet shift, as if the temple itself was reacting to his words. The walls seemed to close in around me, the air growing colder, thicker. My pulse raced in my ears as I tried to comprehend what he was saying. What do you mean? I whispered, my voice barely audible. The man reached up slowly and removed his mask, revealing a face that was not unfamiliar. It was like looking into a mirror, a version of myself, but older, worn, with lines that spoke of years or perhaps centuries of pain. His eyes were mine, yet not mine. There was an emptiness in them, a darkness that seemed to go on forever. I am you, he said, his voice now a low echo of my own. I am the shadow of the truth you will eventually become. The truth that you must accept if you wish to survive. The world seemed to blur around me. My knees buckled beneath me, and I staggered backward, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. This man, this shadow, was me? Was this what I was destined to become? A dark reflection of myself, bound by the very power I had sought to control. No, I gasped. This can't be true. I don't want this. You don't have a choice, he said, stepping forward with an eerie calm. The artifact chose you for a reason. And that reason is not to save the worlds. It is to destroy them. You will become the force that tears apart all that you hold dear. You will be the harbinger of chaos. I backed away, my heart hammering in my chest, but there was nowhere to go. The walls of the temple were closing in on me. The shadows seemed to stretch and bend, creeping closer, suffocating me. No. This can't be my future. I won't let it be. You have no power over it, he said, his voice a cold echo of mine. It is already too late. A violent pulse of energy surged through me, and I screamed, clutching my chest as I felt the artifact's power flood my veins. The temple trembled, as though the very foundations of reality were shaking. The land itself seemed to scream in agony, the two worlds colliding once again. And in that moment I understood. There was no escaping it. The truth was inescapable. I was not the savior of these worlds. I was their destroyer. Chapter 6. The Reckoning. I couldn't breathe. The weight of his words, the revelation of my own future, crushed me like an avalanche, sweeping away every shred of hope, every thought of redemption. The world around me seemed to warp and twist, like the reality I had known was dissolving into chaos. The artifact within me pulsed with a violent rhythm, as if responding to the dark energy that the man, my shadow, was projecting. The walls of the temple seemed to collapse inward, the shadows stretching and warping, as if the very structure of the place was reacting to the terrible truth that had just been unveiled. "You can feel it, can't you?" the man, my dark reflection, asked, his voice laced with cruel satisfaction. "The power that is beginning to take hold of you. The power that will shape your destiny. Your fate was sealed the moment you touched the artifact. There is no escaping it now." I staggered backward, my vision blurring as panic set in. "No," I gasped, clutching my head, as if that might stop the terrifying wave of power coursing through me. "This isn't real. This can't be me." But deep down I knew. It was real. The artifact, the ancient power it held, was already binding me to this twisted future. The words of the figure in the forest, the warnings I had ignored, they had all led to this. The artifact had chosen me not to restore the balance, but to bring destruction, to undo everything. I wasn't the savior. I was the cause of the chaos, the harbinger of the world's collapse. "You are me," the man repeated, stepping closer, his voice growing darker. "And soon you will understand the full scope of what that means. You will embrace the darkness within you." I shook my head violently, as if denying the truth could make it go away. But it didn't. The power thrummed in my chest, spreading like wildfire through my veins. The temple seemed to pulse and sync with it, the walls vibrating with the rising energy, the ground beneath me trembling. Every step I took felt heavier, like the weight of my own existence was dragging me down. "I won't become you," I whispered, more to myself than to him. "I won't let this happen." "You don't have a choice," he said, his tone cold, final. "The artifact has chosen you, and its power will consume you, whether you want it to or not. It is already too late for you to turn back." I tried to focus, to think, but everything seemed to be slipping away from me. The words, the power, the temple, all of it was closing in. The weight of what he said, the inevitability of my future, pressed down on me, suffocating me. The darkness within me stirred, a cold, unrelenting force, and I knew then that I was no longer just a victim of fate. I was becoming something else, something far darker. The power surged again like an unstoppable tide, and I cried out in pain, clutching my chest, my heart racing. The artifact was responding to the man's presence, and it was like it had found its true master, the one it had always been meant for. "You can feel it, can't you?" he asked, his voice now dripping with satisfaction. "This is your destiny, just as it was mine. You will become the ruler of this land, the one who commands the forces that bind these worlds together. And once you embrace the power, there will be no turning back." I collapsed to my knees, my breath shallow, the world spinning around me. My hands trembled, and for a brief moment, I wondered if I was losing myself entirely. The power was consuming me, and I could feel the darkness clawing at the edges of my mind, urging me to give in, to let go. But a small, defiant spark within me refused to die. This wasn't who I was. This wasn't my fate. I had come this far, battled my fears, and walked through the gates of this forsaken land for a reason. There had to be another way. "No," I gasped, forcing the words out despite the overwhelming tide of energy. "I won't accept it. I can still stop this." The man, my shadow, my dark reflection, smiled, a thin, cruel smile. "You can try," he said softly. "But in the end, the darkness is stronger than you. It always has been." I clenched my fists, the pulse of power intensifying within me, as if the very fabric of my being was being torn apart. I could feel the weight of the artifact within me, its energy swelling like it was trying to break free. And I realized, with sudden clarity, that this wasn't just about the artifact. It was about me. The power wasn't something I could control, it was controlling me. But as much as the darkness pressed in on me, I refused to give in. I had made it this far. I had seen what this world was like before it fell into ruin, and I had felt the pull of its ancient energy. But I also saw what it could be. I saw the balance that had once existed here. The worlds were not meant to collapse. Not like this. I could feel the remnants of the old magic, the magic that once protected this land, still lingering in the air, waiting to be harnessed. The truth had been hiding from me all along. I wasn't just the destroyer of worlds. I was the one who could restore them too. The thought sparked something in me, a flicker of hope that cut through the suffocating darkness. Maybe I wasn't meant to wield the artifact's destructive power. Maybe I was meant to wield its power for something greater. For healing, for restoring, for bringing balance back to the worlds that had been torn apart. I didn't need to embrace the darkness within me. I could fight it. I had to fight it. With every ounce of strength I could muster, I pushed against the power inside me, forcing it back, forcing it to bend to my will. It was like trying to hold back a flood, but I refused to let go. The darkness writhed and twisted, fighting to take control, but I wouldn't let it. "I will not become you," I said through clenched teeth, my voice stronger now, filled with defiance. "I will find another way." The man's smile faltered, just for a moment, before his expression hardened. "You think you can fight it," he sneered. "You think you can defy your fate." But there was something in his voice now, something that sounded almost uncertain. I stood up slowly, my body trembling with exertion, but my mind clearer than it had been in weeks. The shadows around me seemed to recoil from my resolve. The darkness within me was still there, but it no longer held the same power over me. "I don't know if I can win," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "But I won't stop trying. I will find a way to restore the balance." The man's eyes narrowed, his mask of arrogance slipping for the first time. "We shall see," he said, his tone colder than before. "But know this, no one escapes their destiny. Not even you." And with that, he disappeared into the shadows, leaving me standing alone in the temple, my mind still spinning, my body still aching. But I had made a decision. Path ahead would not be easy. The power that coursed through me would be my greatest challenge. But I wasn't alone. I had come too far to let this world slip into darkness. I would find the strength to restore what had been lost, no matter the cost. Chapter 7. The Tides of Destiny. The weight of the man's words, the flicker of doubt that had passed through his dark eyes, lingered in my mind as I stood alone in the temple. The air was thick with tension, the power of the artifact still swirling around me like an invisible storm. The temple, which had once felt like a place of mystery and foreboding, now felt like a prison, a cage made of stone and ancient magic, and I was trapped in its suffocating embrace. But something had changed. The darkness that had once seemed all-consuming was now a distant roar in the back of my mind. It hadn't been vanquished, not yet, but I had pushed it away. For the first time in days I felt a sense of clarity. I understood now what I had to do. It was not the artifact itself that was dangerous, but the way it had been used. To manipulate, to destroy, to reshape the fabric of reality. And it had chosen me, not by some cosmic accident, but because of something deep within me that had been waiting to be awakened. I wasn't meant to be a pawn. I wasn't meant to be a destroyer. I was meant to wield the power of the artifact and restore the balance. But how? I turned, my eyes scanning the temple, searching for something. Anything that could help me understand how to control this power. The altar where I had stood moments before seemed far less imposing now. The carvings on the walls were no longer just relics of the past. They were messages, hints of something greater. I approached the altar again, running my fingers over the stone. It was cold, but not just physically. It felt empty, as if it had once contained something important, something vital, but had been drained over time. A glimmer of something caught my eye. In the far corner of the room, hidden beneath a layer of moss and vines, was a stone tablet, half buried in the earth. The symbols on it were faint, worn by the passage of time, but they resembled the same runes that had been on the artifact. The same symbols I had seen in the forest. Without thinking, I knelt beside the tablet, brushing away the debris to reveal the full image. It was a map, or perhaps a blueprint, of the very land I stood in. A map that showed the veins of power coursing through the earth, connecting the ruins, the artifact, and the temple. I could feel it, the energy. It was coming from the heart of the temple, from beneath my feet, where the artifact had been hidden. The power source was connected to everything. The artifact wasn't just an object. It was a conduit, a bridge between the worlds. And somehow, the temple, this ancient place, was the key to controlling it. A whisper in the back of my mind urged me to act, to stop hesitating, to stop doubting myself. The artifact had chosen me for a reason. I was not powerless in this. I was the one who could unlock the full potential of the power within me. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and placed the artifact on the altar. The moment my hands made contact with the stone, the world seemed to hold its breath. The energy swirled around me, crackling in the air, and I felt the power coursing through my veins again. Only this time it was different. It was calmer, controlled. The markings on the tablet began to glow faintly, and the symbols on the altar responded, shifting and rearranging themselves like a puzzle coming together. The temple groaned, its ancient bones shifting and creaking as if waking from a long slumber. Then it happened. The ground beneath me trembled violently, and the air crackled with raw energy. The shadows that had clung to the walls of the temple recoiled, and for a brief, fleeting moment, the temple seemed to pulse with life. The artifact, glowing brightly in my hands, resonated with the energy around me. I was no longer fighting against the darkness. I was commanding it. The temple floor split open, revealing a hidden chamber below. A vast, underground cavern stretched out beneath the ruins, its walls covered in the same runes I had seen before, but larger, more intricate, and far older. It was as if the very core of the land had been sealed away for centuries, waiting for someone to unlock it. I stepped forward, my heart pounding in my chest. Every instinct screamed for me to turn back, to run, but I couldn't. I was already too deep. The power was calling to me, urging me forward, and I could feel the artifact pulsing in my hands, sinking with the rhythm of the earth beneath me. I descended into the cavern, the air growing colder with each step. The walls seemed to close in, narrowing as I walked, but I couldn't stop. There was a presence here, a force older than time itself. I had come so far. I had to see this through. At the center of the cavern, bathed in a soft, eerie light, stood a massive stone structure. It was a monument, a pillar that stretched far into the shadows above, carved with intricate symbols that matched those on the artifact. At its base, a shallow pool of water shimmered with an otherworldly glow. I approached cautiously, feeling the pull of the power, and knelt by the pool. The surface of the water rippled, distorting the reflections of the symbols on the pillar, creating strange, shifting patterns. Suddenly, the air around me thickened, and the voice of my shadow, the man who had claimed to be my future, echoed in my mind. "You can't do this," he said, his voice cold and mocking. "You don't understand what you're awakening. This is bigger than you. It's bigger than anything you could possibly imagine." I closed my eyes, pushing his voice from my mind. He was wrong. I knew what I had to do now. The power of the artifact, the power within me, could restore the balance. It was not a force of destruction. It was a force of creation. I had to embrace it, not as a destroyer but as a healer, a restorer. I held the artifact above the pool, and as I did, the water began to ripple more violently, swirling with energy. The symbols on the pillar glowed brighter, and the ground beneath me trembled once more. The power was awakening, but this time I was ready. As the artifact descended into the water, the world around me seemed to hold its breath. The shadows retreated, the energy shifting, changing. The two worlds, the fabric of reality, began to realign. The power I had feared was not my enemy. It was the key to restoring everything that had been lost. And with that realization, I knew that my journey had only just begun. Chapter 8. The Price of Power. I felt the surge of power as the artifact touched the water's surface. It was as though the world itself had taken a deep breath, exhaling a gust of wind that rattled the ancient pillars around me. The cavern trembled, and the once hidden symbols carved into the walls ignited, glowing with an intensity one had never seen before. It was as if the entire underground world had been asleep for centuries and was now waking up in response to the artifact's call. I stood there, still holding the artifact, as the energy around me intensified. The ground beneath my feet shook, the walls hummed with ancient magic, and the air crackled with power. It was no longer a storm of chaos. It was a controlled, deliberate force, as though the world was aligning itself in answer to my touch. But there was something else, something more subtle that I began to sense. The energy that had once felt alien to me, something to be feared, was now familiar. It coursed through me like a current, synchronizing with the heartbeat of the world beneath the earth. I could feel the land breathing, responding to my every thought, every movement. The artifact was no longer just a tool. It had become part of me and I, part of it. But as the world around me shifted, a creeping sense of unease began to settle deep within my chest. The more I focused, the more I understood that the power I was tapping into was not something to be wielded lightly. It was a force that had shaped the fate of these worlds long before my birth, and it was beginning to change me. I felt the presence of the man, the shadow of my future, looming in my mind. His voice, though distant, still echoed in my thoughts, warning me of the dangers I faced. "This is not your power to control," he had said. "You are only the vessel, and soon the power will consume you." I fought against the tightening grip of fear that threatened to overwhelm me. I had come this far, I could not afford to back down now. But deep down, I knew there was truth in his words. The artifact, though I had called it a tool for restoration, was a double-edged sword. It had the power to mend the worlds, yes, but it also had the power to destroy them, to unravel the very fabric of reality. I steadied my breathing and focused, trying to quiet the chaos in my mind. I had to remain in control. I had to use the artifact's power wisely, or the consequences would be catastrophic. The cavern seemed to pulse with life, the walls vibrating in rhythm with the power surging from within me. I could feel it pulling me, beckoning me toward the heart of the temple, toward something that was hidden even deeper beneath the earth. The energy I was tapping into was guiding me, but at the same time, I could sense that it was leading me down a path I wasn't sure I could return from. The pool beneath me began to glow brighter, its surface now rippling with raw energy. The symbols on the pillar seemed to shift once again, rearranging themselves in a pattern that felt too perfect, too deliberate to be random. I knew then, whatever I was about to unleash, whatever I was about to do, would change everything. I hesitated. A nagging doubt crept up, and my fingers trembled around the artifact. Was this the right choice? Was I truly ready to wield this power, to make the sacrifice required to restore the balance? What would it cost me? The ground beneath me shifted again, more violently this time, and the pillar in front of me cracked. The air grew heavy, thick with an oppressive force that seemed to draw the very light from the cavern. The artifact in my hand began to glow brighter still, as if it sensed my hesitation. It pulsed with an urgency that made my heart race. "Do it," the voice of the shadow echoed in my mind, colder now, almost mocking. "You have no choice. You cannot stop what has already begun." And yet, as the words settled into my thoughts, I felt a surge of defiance. Could stop this. I had to stop it, if not for me, then for the worlds I was trying to save. I lowered the artifact into the pool of glowing water, watching as the liquid seemed to part in response to its touch, swirling around the artifact like a living thing. The energy in the cavern intensified, the air crackling with power. For a moment, everything held still. The very world seemed to pause, as if waiting for me to make the final decision. Then, the artifact began to sink beneath the surface, and a blinding light filled the cavern, searing my vision and making the ground tremble violently beneath my feet. I felt the power surge through me, flooding my senses, filling every part of my being, and for a moment I was no longer just me. I was the world. I was the energy that had shaped the land, the artifact, the very essence of life and death. But with that connection came an overwhelming pressure, a crushing weight that threatened to swallow me whole. I could feel the power of the artifact pulling me in, threatening to consume me as it had consumed those before me. The cavern around me seemed to close in, the walls narrowing, the shadows stretching toward me like claws, desperate to claim me. Suddenly, the man's voice echoed louder, almost as though he were standing beside me, whispering directly in my ear. You will never escape it. You will never be free of this power. It is your fate to be consumed by it, just as I was. The pressure mounted, a suffocating force threatening to crush me, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I might lose myself entirely. But then, a strange sense of calm washed over me. I remembered why I had come here. I wasn't just fighting for my own survival, I was fighting for the survival of the world's. The land, the people, the balance that had been disrupted long ago. I had to fight. I had to endure. I closed my eyes, focusing all my energy on the purpose that had brought me here. The power surged again, and this time I welcomed it. I didn't fight it. I embraced it. The artifact became part of me, and I became part of it. Together we could restore the balance. Together we could heal the worlds. The blinding light reached its peak, and then it stopped. The cavern went still. The power faded, leaving a strange emptiness in its wake. For a moment, everything was quiet, as though the world was holding its breath. I opened my eyes. The cavern was still there, but the energy was no longer threatening. The walls no longer seemed to close in. The artifact, now glowing softly in my hand, seemed to have found its place, its purpose. The power had been channeled, but it wasn't the destructive force I had feared. It was something else. Something restorative. Healing. I exhaled, feeling the weight lift from my chest, but as I did, I realized something. It was not over. Not yet. The worlds were still in danger, the balance still fragile. The true test had yet to come. And somewhere deep within the depths of the temple, I knew that the final choice was still mine to make. Chapter 9. The Reckoning. The cavern was quiet now, save for the faint hum of energy still pulsing from the artifact. I stood there, breathless, my fingers still curled around the smooth surface of the relic, but something had shifted in me. I had felt the power surge through me, had come face to face with the overwhelming potential for destruction, yet it hadn't consumed me. In that moment I knew that I had a choice. A choice that no one, least of all the shadow of my future, had truly understood. I had chosen a different path. But I couldn't afford to linger in that moment of calm. The quiet that had settled around me was only temporary, a fragile peace before the storm. I had done something, changed something, but I could feel the weight of what was to come pressing against me. The very air in the cavern felt charged, like a storm that had yet to fully break. The tension was thick, palpable. It was as if the artifact itself knew what I was trying to do. It had seen through my intentions and understood them. I took a step back, the pulse of energy from the artifact resonating with the beat of my heart. With every passing second, I could feel the connection between us strengthening, growing. It was as if the artifact was not just an object, but a living force, a part of something much bigger than myself. I had awakened it, but now the question was, what would I do with it? Turning away from the glowing pool, I retraced my steps back to the center of the cavern. The walls loomed around me, ancient and timeless, as though they had witnessed the rise and fall of countless lives before me. I wondered how many others had come before me, seeking the power of the artifact, perhaps with the same noble intentions. But those who had come before had failed, hadn't they? They had tried to control the power, and in doing so, they had lost themselves. Their ambition had consumed them. I couldn't afford that. I would not be like them. As I walked, the shadows shifted, as if following me, watching me. I could feel their eyes on me, the presence of those who had once been here, the ones who had succumbed to the power. Their voices whispered at the edges of my mind, warning me, calling me to turn back. You cannot control it. It will break you, they murmured. The artifact is not meant for someone like you. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. The artifact pulsed in my hands, a steady rhythm that seemed to echo the beating of my own heart. The voices grew louder, more insistent, but I blocked them out, forcing my mind to focus. I couldn't let fear control me. I had come too far for that. And then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing through the cavern. Not my own. Someone else was here. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. My instincts screamed at me to hide, to retreat, but it was too late. The figure appeared from the shadows, stepping into the dim light of the cavern, and my breath caught in my throat. It was him. The man. The shadow of my future. He stood there, tall and imposing, his dark eyes locked onto mine. There was no mistaking it. This was the same figure who had appeared to me in dreams, the same presence who had warned me, taunted me, filled me with doubt. The man who had seemed so certain of my failure, of my destruction. He smiled, a cruel twist of his lips. "I knew you'd come here," he said, his voice low and steady. "I knew you'd think you could control it." I didn't move. My body felt frozen, as if his very presence was enough to paralyze me. But I had come this far. I had made my choice. I wouldn't back down now. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice steady despite the racing of my heart. The man's smile widened. "What do I want?" he echoed, as though the question itself were absurd. "I want what you've always wanted. To wield the power. To shape the future. To bend the world to your will." His words hit me like a slap, and for a moment, doubt crept back into my chest. Was that what I wanted? Was that why I had come here? Had I truly been seeking power all along? Well, I wasn't like him. I had made my choice. I hadn't come here to control the world. I had come here to restore the balance. The world's needed healing, not destruction. But the man's presence, his words, his dark charisma made me question that conviction, just for a moment. He stepped closer, his gaze never leaving mine. "You don't understand, do you? The artifact is not a gift. It's a curse. You've unlocked something that cannot be controlled. Something that will destroy everything you hold dear." "You're wrong," I said, shaking my head. "I'm not here to destroy. I'm here to fix what's been broken." The man laughed, the sound dark and hollow. "You really believe that, don't you?" His voice dropped, becoming colder. "You think you're the one who can fix things, the one who can control it. The artifact doesn't care about your noble intentions. It will consume you just like it consumed me. You'll see. You'll be just like all the others." I felt a chill creep down my spine. His words carried a weight, a terrifying truth that I couldn't ignore. Had I made a terrible mistake? Could I truly control the power I had unleashed? Or was I just another fool, standing on the edge of a precipice, unaware of the abyss below? "I won't be like you," I said, my voice firm, though my hands shook slightly as I held the artifact. "I will not let the power control me. I will use it to restore the balance." The man stepped back, his expression hardening. "We'll see," he said, his tone dark. "We'll see if your resolve is strong enough." And with that, he vanished into the shadows, leaving me alone once more in the cavern, the artifact still glowing softly in my hands. I was alone, but the weight of his words lingered. I couldn't ignore them. Had to be strong. I had to prove him wrong. The path ahead was uncertain, and the road would be difficult. But one thing was clear, I was not done yet. The power was mine to wield, and I would not let it destroy me. Had a choice. I would restore the balance, no matter the cost. But as the echoes of the man's voice faded into the darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing at the edge of something much bigger than I could ever understand. Chapter 10: The Final Choice. The silence that followed the man's departure was deafening. My breath was shallow, the air thick with uncertainty. The artifact still pulsed gently in my hands, its glow casting long, shifting shadows on the walls of the cavern. I could feel its power, its potential, thrumming beneath my fingertips. It was as if the very essence of the world was contained within it, waiting for someone to give it direction. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized the enormity of the choice I had made. I had taken the first step, unlocked the power, but now, what was I truly capable of? The man's warning echoed in my mind again, the same cruel certainty in his voice. "You will be consumed." Was he right? Could I truly control the artifact, wield its power without falling victim to it? His words gnawed at me, turning the once clear path I had been walking into a labyrinth of doubt. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. The cavern felt more oppressive now. The air seemed to hang heavier, the shadows darker. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to leave, to sever my connection to this place and to the artifact. But deep down, I knew that leaving wasn't an option. Not now. I had come too far, and I had seen too much to simply walk away. My gaze shifted back to the glowing pool. It shimmered, casting ripples of light across the stone, as though beckoning me. The symbols on the pillar began to glow once more, their light pulsing in time with the beat of my heart, as if the artifact itself was responding to the thoughts I had swirling in my mind. A decision was coming. I could feel it in my bones. This was the moment. I stepped toward the pool once more, my heart heavy with the weight of everything I had learned. The artifact still glowed with a soft light, but now it felt like it was pushing me, urging me forward. The cavern itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for me to make my move. I hesitated. What if I was wrong? What if, in my desire to restore balance, I had unleashed something far more dangerous than I could imagine? The man's words haunted me. His warning about the artifact being a curse, something not to be controlled. But the truth was, I had already touched it. The power was already inside me. I had already chosen my path. The power was not evil. It wasn't inherently destructive. It was simply raw and tame. The problem wasn't the artifact. The problem was the way it was used. And I had to be the one to show the world a new way. I knelt beside the pool, the light from the artifact casting soft shadows across the stone as I held it above the water. My mind raced with questions. Can I truly wield this power? Can I control it? But in the depths of my heart, I knew the answer. I could control it because I wasn't doing this for myself. I wasn't seeking power for power's sake. I was seeking it to heal, to restore, to bring balance back to a world that had long been shattered. A rush of wind swept through the cavern, as though the very air was stirring in response to my thoughts. The symbols on the pillar shimmered, glowing brighter, as if encouraging me. I lowered the artifact into the pool. First, nothing happened. The water simply parted around the relic, its light reflecting in the ripples. But then the cavern trembled again, a low hum filling the air. The symbols on the walls seemed to shift, rearranging themselves, and the very ground beneath me began to quake. The power I had unleashed was not just in the artifact, it was in me now, in the earth, in the very fabric of this world. The light from the artifact began to intensify, and I felt the energy surge through my body. It was like being struck by lightning, a rush of force that coursed through my veins, electrifying every cell. I could feel the world around me bending, shifting, as if the laws of nature themselves were being rewritten. It was overwhelming, blinding. I staggered, my knees threatening to buckle beneath me. And then, in the midst of the chaos, something shifted. The artifact's light pulsed, brighter than the sun. The power swelled, crashing over me like a wave. And then it focused. The wild energy that had once threatened to tear me apart now seemed to align, to channel itself into a single, purposeful force. I closed my eyes, bracing against the intensity. It was a whirlwind of power, but it was no longer out of control. It was no longer threatening. Understood now. The artifact wasn't a curse. It wasn't something to be feared. It was a force of nature like fire, capable of both destruction and creation. It was a tool, but only in the right hands. And then I knew what I had to do. I opened my eyes, and the light from the artifact shifted. The world around me rippled, bending in strange, impossible ways. And for a brief moment, I felt connected to everything. The land, the people, the very essence of life. The power I had unlocked wasn't just for me. It was for everyone. But the choice was still mine. The man's voice echoed in my mind once more. You can't control it. You're just a pawn. I shook my head. No, I was not a pawn. Not anymore. I was the one who could choose how the artifact was used. I could restore balance. I could heal the world. And then I made my final choice. I reached into the light, drawing the energy around me, and I channeled it into the earth. I focused the power, pushing it deep beneath the surface, into the heart of the world. I felt the land respond, felt it breathe beneath my hands. The balance was shifting. The wounds of the earth were healing. The light from the artifact dimmed, its energy spent. The cavern grew still again, the echoes of its power fading into silence. I fell to my knees, exhausted, my body trembling from the force of the power I had just unleashed. But in that moment I knew it had worked. The balance had been restored. The artifact was no longer a force of chaos. It was a force of creation, of healing. But as I looked up, I knew the journey was not over. The power had been set free, but there was still much to be done. I had made my choice, and the path forward would not be easy. But I was ready. The world was waiting for me.